The Spin-off Podcast Network. You're listening to Business is Boring, a podcast that reckons it's anything but. Business is Boring is brought to you by SparkLab, offering inspiration and practical advice to help businesses find their edge. To hear more about SparkLab, including details about the latest events, workshops, and business tools, visit sparklab.co.nz. And now, here's your host, Simon Pound.
Kia ora koutou katoa, and welcome to Business is Boring. The fragrance industry is bananas. Perfume began as essential oils and natural ingredients, but now it's mainly synthetic and petrochemical derived. Many of the biggest names, companies and sellers are more about chemicals and packaging than the scents. Frances Shoemack, a Kiwi winemaker based in Amsterdam, found this when she was looking for a great natural perfume. Unable to find one that was contemporary and doing things in a better way, she set off on a mission to work with master perfumers and the best makers to make a luxurious natural range of perfumes with ethics and aesthetics to match. Frances founded Abel and has grown it to be stocked in great stores in more than 30 countries. Now back in New Zealand, she's completed a significant capital round to further take her clean and beautiful perfumes to the world. To chat the journey, natural fragrance in an unnatural world, and growing global from Aotearoa, Frances Shoemack joins us now. Tēnā koe.
Yeah, kia ora, Simon.
Hey, so thanks so much for being here this morning. Tell us how it is that you came to start a natural perfume brand in Amsterdam.
Bit of a classic founder story that I was looking for something I couldn't find and was audacious enough to think that it might be something I could do. So my husband and I, we moved to Amsterdam from Auckland about 12 or so years ago, just with backpacks really, got jobs up there, and I quickly fell in love with the world of like indie perfume brands. I was really just emerging at that time, but I was already a very natural, conscious consumer, and so I was kind of, headed straight in that direction of, oh, cool, where's the natural brand within this? And when I couldn't find one, and my background was winemaking, I figured that was kind of enough armory to go out there and try it myself. So,
yeah, that's so cool. So you were a winemaker before that. But did you try and find, is there a wine scene in Amsterdam or?
Yeah, do you know what? I studied viticulture enology straight from school and then kind of cut my teeth in the wine industry here out of Auckland, and was actually ready to give that a bit of a break for a while. So part of the decision to move to Amsterdam was like, let's try something new, You don't move to Amsterdam for the wine. It's you can buy a beer in like 100 different glasses and you ask for a wine and they give you a cup, basically, so...
And in terms of like the link between wine and perfumery, like they're kind of the two areas in life where there's a language and a communication system around scent. And it's really funny, hey, how there's so many things to do with sound and sight that everyone kind of agrees on and shares. But then when it comes to smells, it's a bit of a mystery unless you're in those kind of worlds.
Oh, it's a total mystery. And I'm this kind of bore championing our sense of smell because I think it's so underutilized in modern life. I often use the example like when was the last time you smelt your milk or whatever to see if it was off rather than looking at the use by date. Like we have this incredible organ. A master perfumer can identify something like 2,500 individual smells. So we have this incredible capacity that just none of us use really. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's kind of a fear around getting it wrong with scent as well in a funny way. Like we spend so much time as people kind of pretending we're not animals is what I reckon, because I got really interested.
Like we don't like dirty smells.
Yeah, well, I got really interested in wine and perfume a few years ago, and then like having to learn like what the smells are and like get the language around communicating it just showed me how little I kind of used it or went to it in day-to-day life. And I ended up thinking that it had something to do with us trying to pretend that we're not these kind of sniffing beasts using scent as a sense.
That's so interesting, because our sense of smell is really primal, like it's the only sense that has a direct neural pathway to our subconscious. So it really is tapping into that kind of fight and flight mode. And historically, that was how we used it. But yeah, I totally agree. I often get asked, like, what's the most kind of useful thing I took from the wine industry to the perfume industry? Because they are, whatever I thought at the time, they are super different. And I often reply with just that confidence to talk about smell. And I think we don't have a vocabulary for smell. We borrow most of our words from sight or food or, so we kind of, people are just really unsure about even verbalizing what they're smelling or whether they like something even.
Yeah, and it's kind of euphemistic as well. Like I remember I was working as a wine waiter, and it was just magic when winemakers would come in and they'd say, well, this Viognier, you're going to smell apricots, but not any apricots. Canned apricots. And you'd be like, oh yeah, and then you smell it and it would smell exactly like canned apricots. And you'd be like, that's kind of magic,
Yeah, power of suggestion probably a little bit there too.
Probably do. And then they'd say saddle, and you're like, well, saddle. And then saddle was meaning kind of musky, like, nether parts and leather. And you're like, oh gosh, I guess that's what that means.
You've got a very visual, that's the thing I think quite often we rely on taking it away from smell and trying to make it tangible with some kind of visual reference. Yeah.
And in terms of teaching yourself that vocabulary and that way to kind of get into perfume, how do you go about that? Because in Amsterdam, you're probably reasonably close to centres of perfume and history there.
Yeah, the Dutch do a little bit. I think in some ways it's a big similarity between perfume and wine is they really both have their, at least the way that we know it as modern kind of perfumery has its roots very entrenched in French and Italian culture. So that's really kind of the home place of modern perfumery. But I think the big thing for me was recognizing. So when I started out, I got that whole, you can't make natural perfume, a whole bunch of reasons why, and quickly realized that there was a very negative attitude towards naturals in the industry. So for me, straight away, that was like, okay, I need to find this team of people to surround me with. I'm not an expert. I'm totally green when it comes to the perfume world. So for me, it was surrounding myself with people that I could bring into Abel that know and understand and can kind of heighten, especially our master perfumers. That was kind of a key part. So I've kind of learned through osmosis, I think. Truth is I wanted to start a business. I didn't want to study perfumery. So I've kind of learned as I've gone.
And being able to kind of co-opt the reputation and experience of a master perfumer is better than spending 30 years getting yourself to kind of master perfumery or something.
Totally. Also because, these days especially, I am a business owner, so I love the perfume creation process, asking in my team is when I get super excited, but it's actually such a small part of my day that had I have thrown all my time and energy into training to be a perfumer, I probably, all of the other aspects, the logistics, the sales, they're just as important.
What was the situation like when you just mentioned that there was kind of a antipathy towards natural perfume? Tell me about that, because from small little journeys in perfume, there was a very closed world that had a very kind of set way of doing things, and all of it was kind of petrochemical and plastic based.
Yeah, totally. I mean, people don't realize it with perfume. It's we talk about closed industries. Perfume is perhaps the worst. And there's definitely still, it's changing really quickly, which is super exciting, but there's definitely still a feeling of that, those 1950s, 60s chemicals solve everything. I can kind of, like plastic is the new whatever. And so, yeah, I'd hazard a guess. I always say 95%, but I think it's like 99.9% of the ingredients used in the perfume world are synthesized from crude oil. So, it's an industry that runs off petrol, basically. And so it is changing, but it's such an entrenched industry and so established, so global, it takes time to move a big ship like that, right? So we're, for decades, all of the R&D has been going into, deriving new scent molecules from petrochemicals. Now we're shifting towards deriving those from renewable sources. For us, we only work with ingredients from plants, but there's some really cool biotech, natural science stuff going on. But yeah, I think I can't remember your question now.
No, you're great. You're great. Like
miles off track. But yes, I think there's too many big players with too much of a vested interest in the way that they currently do things, and it's cheap.
Yeah, and they're massive chemical companies, the big companies in the world of perfumery. And there was this massive headwind that was coming against naturals when I was really looking into it, in that EU regulations were making it illegal to put plant-derived, oils in perfumes that have been in them forever because, a vanishingly small percentage of users might have allergic reactions. And so all of these great perfumes of history were being reformulated with synthetic petrochemical-derived alternatives.
Yeah, and that's that classic self-regulated industry, right? So globally, the fragrance industry is self-regulated, and so you have to be shown to be doing something. So you're talking about the allergens regulations, which, essentially they banned 26 ingredients, all natural, because of them being potential allergens. And so, that was a really, what was that, like 10 years ago or something, maybe a bit longer. That was a really kind of backward trend and definitely slows up the development with naturals. But I think we've come past that, which is really nice.
But you landed in those headwinds and, hit an industry that was like, no, everything's plastic and chemical and petrochemical based. And, we're actually banning a whole lot of natural oils. How did you go about getting it off the ground and getting it started with that focus on naturals?
Honestly, I just think I believed in it and I just gave it a go. And it was really baby steps for the first especially the first couple of years. So I was out of our apartment in Amsterdam. I did have Isaac, our perfumer, on board, so that was kind of a key cog there. But I don't talk about it much, but when we first started out, I was so idealistic. We only use organically certified ingredients. And so if you look at the palette of perfume ingredients, there's something like 4,000. If you look at the palette of naturals, it's somewhere around 400. If you look at the palette of organically certified, it's like 40. So our first two perfumes we launched were actually 100% organically certified. I think they're honestly the only two probably ever still commercially viable fragrances. And yeah, look, I don't know, everybody has different ways of starting businesses or, approaching business. But for me, at least, it was like a just try, just get started and kind of improve from there. So when we relaunched the collection after a couple of years in business, that was when I made the move to like, okay, yeah, it's not scalable, it's not sustainable to work with only organically certified ingredients, and actually like the 99% of the industry is so far to one end, and I'd positioned us so far to the other end, kind of in a way we've had to come closer to the industry. But yeah, that's maybe if I came from the industry, I'd do things differently, but I was really learning, pushing, stepping sideways, the whole time, so...
And when did you know that this approach was starting to work? Like, it's a really hard thing to kind of go against.
Yeah.
And it's, especially when one's so kind of set and sure of itself.
Probably conversations with people the whole way along, like even what we had doing now and, seeing what you know about it. Very early on, our first account that we landed, the Skins Cosmetics in the Netherlands, they're kind of like a Mecca equivalent, let's say. And so they were our first wholesale account, and for them to buy into it, it was like, okay, cool. These guys know they've nurtured the top kind of skincare beauty brands. And so little things like that the whole time. Press getting on board. There were just always lots of positive signs that this is something that we can keep building. But definitely the last couple of years, there's been a bit of a momentous shift, which is super exciting for us. And if not mainstream, at least it's kind of starting to come into the mainstream kind of cognitive. Yeah, we're almost there.
And at what stage did you decamp from Amsterdam and come back to Wellington?
Yeah, probably not the best business decision. I'm a person, so really lifestyle. My husband and I, we had 2 children and a business up in Amsterdam. He works full time, not for Abel, but it was really one of those. We'd actually come out to New Zealand in what were the Dutch summer holidays because our son Rufus was at school, and in August, and kind of landed back in Amsterdam September 2019 with that like middle of the night jet lag situation. And then we just both, after 10 years nearly, looked at each other and were like, okay, yeah, it's time. So I don't know if it was the school holidays, the kids, seeing them in New Zealand, but it was very much like a family lifestyle choice to come home. But I'd always set Abel up in a way that I knew that was the end point. It was always a question of when, not if, we'd move home. So it was always important to me to set the business up that it could be kind of not virtual, but it wouldn't be a huge shift to move it.
And we'll be back after the break to talk about growing global from New Zealand, honing in on purpose, capital raising, and what's next. Spark is proud to partner with the Sustainable Business Network and the Climate Action Toolbox. The free Climate Action Toolbox can provide you with simple step-by-step guides to measure and reduce your emissions. Help lead the way to a low-carbon future for New Zealand. Visit sparklab.co.nz/sustainability to find out more.
Ready to rediscover the joys of cycling? With over 300 kilometres of cycle paths across Tāmaki Makaurau, jumping on your bike and going for a ride is such a fun way to discover the city from a different perspective. Cycling is getting more and more popular across Auckland, so now's a great time to join the hype and give cycling a go. Head to at.govt/cycling to find your nearest cycleway today.
This episode is brought to you by Bumble. So, you want to find someone you're compatible with, specifically someone who's ready for a serious connection, totally open to having kids in the future, is a tall, rock-climbing Libra, and loves rom-coms with vegan pizzas on Tuesdays just as much as you do. Bumble knows that you know exactly what's right for you. So whatever it is you're looking for, Bumble's features can help you find it. Date now on Bumble.
And we're back with Frances Shoemack, founder of Abel. So tell me, how do you go about making a perfume? Like if you decide, I want to make one, what's the process?
Yeah, so I can tell you about our process, and I'd say it's very different, almost the opposite to a lot of brands, and certainly big brands, where the process is very much like a creative industry pitch. So they'll put together a pitch for this new perfume, 25-year-old woman, colour purple, whatever, and the perfumers will pitch. Create perfumes based on that brief, and then they kind of go from there and choose their favourite. Ours couldn't be more ground up than I think it is. So it always used to be that Isaac and I would get together in Paris. He was there kind of 4 or 5 times a year. He's based in Sao Paulo. And together we'd just get out a whole lot of ingredients in the lab and just look at them and whatever was really exciting us at the time, and then kind of build a creative concept around that ingredient. So all of our perfumes are a colour and an ingredient. And so that kind of forms the creative direction. I always make mood boards. Isaac's always laughing at, like, get your mood board out. But it's generally a pretty fun process. Sometimes it can be extremely, like any creative process, if we're kind of knocking heads or it's not working. With naturals, I'd say there's a lot more challenges. You've just got less tools in your toolbox. You can't cover anything up with naturals. But in general, we kind of work on the creative concept together, and then our perfumer, so Isaac, and also Fanny is another perfumer. We work with a lot of French perfumer. We'll kind of go back, and over anything between 6 to 18 months, we'll do, hundreds, sometimes thousands of trials. So we kind of often it'll go through about 7 or 8 kind of rounds of directions, and within that, there'll be dozens of trials. So, yeah.
And what are you looking for in that process? Is it just that kind of visceral, like, is it
yeah,
that?
sometimes that happens. Yeah. And sometimes, like with one of our perfumes, Nurture with Fanny, we actually ended up going back about 3 rounds. We're like, hang on, we had something we freaking loved like 3 months ago. Where is that one? And we went back to him. We're like, oh, that's the one, So it's kind of interesting. It's definitely not a linear process. I don't know if there's aha moments. Maybe occasionally. It also depends on the brief. So we've been doing a lot more in the last couple of years around the functionality of the ingredients. So creating perfumes that are really about obviously the beauty of naturals, that goes without saying, but also kind of Nurture is a good example where we wanted to create a fragrance for new and expecting mothers. We wanted it to be pregnancy safe, breastfeeding safe, all of those things. So that's a slightly different process to just saying, hey, we freaking love vetiver, let's create a perfume around it. It kind of goes project by project.
Which was my process.
Yeah, I know. I thought as I was saying that, it is really nice. So at the time that was Isaac, he was like, it's my fetish.
yeah. And it's really special stuff. And like in terms of that natural oils as well, like when you're using the real oils, you've also got like, so many traditions of using these oils for certain reasons you can draw on, hey?
Oh, so many. And it's so beautiful when the ingredients speak to that themselves. So like, for example, golden neroli, one of my personal favorites. I was pregnant when we were creating this fragrance, and that was one where I was like, I just really want to work with neroli. And Isaac was like, it's a bit grandma, isn't it? And I was like, no, something about it is speaking to me, can we create this really beautiful fragrance? I don't want it to be edgy, I just want beautiful fragrance. And then when we launched it, we did like this little influencer event in Amsterdam, and there were about 5 pregnant women at the event, and all 5 of them were like, what is this? I want to bathe in this. And so then I went away and did the research and was like, oh, wow, neroli has this incredibly rich history of hormone balancing, during kind of hormonal stages for women. So that was a really cool example of we didn't start out with the intention, but it was this kind of innate capacity of the ingredients themselves. So yeah, they're really beautiful.
That's so cool. And that, when you're talking about grandma there, like one of the difficulties in perfume today, right, is that so many things have a fragrance now that beautiful white flowers smell like toilets.
Yeah.
And, just the most gorgeous things you can pick out of the garden, and then you try and put it into a perfume and it smells like your crazy auntie, or, it's just, it can feel old-fashioned or whatever, no offense to any aunties out there.
No, but, and I've,
especially
there's nothing wrong with aunties, or I'm an auntie. No, but I think you also touched that. I've said it a couple of times. I'll keep saying it till it becomes reality, but I think those huge overt room smells and things like that, to me, they're like secondhand smoke.
Yeah.
I don't want to be in a hotel that's like, I don't know if you've had that, situation where you stay in a hotel and like by the middle of the night, I've got a headache because I'm like, this hotel stinks of their synthetic perfume that's pumping through the vats, So I think that trend towards everything being scented is actually a little bit gross. We're all kind of suffocating in it.
On your website, there's a great section about the things that you're doing and the journey you're on as a company to a greater kind of focus on sustainability. And so starting in the natural space that was already kind of, almost by definition what you were doing, but then tell me about the growth of that journey.
Yeah, look, everything we do, we try to do as, with as much respect for nature as we can, basically. The planet and the people kind of like us to be lumped together sometimes. We're all nature. And so sometimes that's easy, and sometimes that's super difficult. And more often than not, there's compromises, So using glass, for example, it's, endlessly recyclable, but it's heavy. So it's a heavier carbon footprint. So anyone that kind of talks to black and white sustainability stuff, I just think they're minimizing a really big topic. So for us, obviously the ingredients are really key. A lot of the petrochemical derivatives are obviously not renewable, but also not biodegradable. They end up washing off our bodies in the shower and ending up in our oceans, where they accumulate just like the nanoplastics. So the ingredients are a big one for us.
You're leaving your own little oil slick in the world.
Yeah, gross, right?
Gross.
Yeah. Yeah, and we don't talk about it a lot. I think sunscreen, rightly so, has started to get a little bit of a presence around that. We know the damage it's doing to the reefs. Greenpeace did a really nice bit of research quite a few years ago now, 5 or 8 years ago, around synthetic musk building up in the aquatic life. So then basically we're eating it's washing off us, it's going into our fish, and then we're eating it.
And there's probably a really good reason you'd make musk synthetically, considering it was originally made out of the secretions of deer anus.
Oh, you're mixing your metaphors there. That's cat anus.
Cat anus, really?
Cat anus is civet,
right.
And musk is the glands of the male deer. So you're on the it's there or thereabouts. But but the cool thing is, so for us, like when I first started out, there was no plant-derived musk equivalent. So in our first 2 perfumes, we didn't use musk. And if I quote Isaac, our perfumer, he would say that making perfumes without musk is akin to cooking without butter. Obviously you can do it, but the point is that butter helps to open up all of the flavors in a meal, in a dish, and musk has the same impact on a perfume. So for our first couple of perfumes, there was no plant-derived alternative, but the way that natural science is going is awesome for us. So we use a plant-derived musk that is produced through like a biofermentation process, and that means that we can get the musk without the deer or the synthetics. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's magic. And in terms of, being more sustainable, you share a story on that page about your cellophane journey and trying to make a cellophane that was better than cellophane. Tell us what cellophane's used for and why you tried to do that and how it went.
Yeah, so we wrap all of the perfume we produce in the Netherlands. So we still produce about 90% of our perfume in Holland. We have started producing our first New Zealand-made line in our little Fabrique, our little perfumery in Wellington, which we don't cellophane. But the ones that we produce in Amsterdam, the packaging is designed in a way that it really needs cellophane. And unfortunately, it's changing really quickly. So this is cool. Like we're on the cusp of customers. When we launched that packaging, customers still wanted the luxury. They didn't want to compromise on any of the luxury in getting sustainability. So we've done things like bioplastic caps that, people probably don't even know that they're bioplastic, but they are. But they're magnetic and they feel luxury. And so we needed to do cellophane with this packaging. We will be switching that out in the coming years, but it needs to be redesigned. But to your question, look, I hated the fact that we were using cellophane. So it was the first time we were using cellophane, and in an ideal world, we wouldn't use an ounce of plastic in our whole process. but it was a requirement from a bunch of our retail partners. And so we used it, and my kind of remit was, okay, cool, we use it, we find a biocellophane equivalent and switch it out. So my kind of process is, let's just keep improving all the time. And so we found this bioplastic cellophane. We found a partner who would use it for us. It had to be done manually. It couldn't be done with a machine. So it was this whole big, process. We had to buy a lot of it. Nobody would kind of insure it, or, there was no guarantee on it. But I really believed in it, probably bullishly, and was like, no, we have to. This is the right direction for Abel. So we introduced this biocellophane, and I think it was within 3 or 4 months. You probably know if you've just read the journal article. We had to recall it. Because it was just starting to fall apart at the corners. We were ending up taking shipments back from partners, which, again, it's that grey area with sustainability. Okay, it's not plastic, but if we're shipping it to you in America and you're shipping it back to us in Europe, that's no longer sustainable. So it was one of those shit, we have to, I have to go back on my word. And I'd done the whole fanfare around we're getting rid of our cellophane. And then I had to do we're switching back to plastic. But I have to say that I think it probably still is one of our most engaged pieces of communication with our audience. We got so many amazing emails from customers. Wasn't the intention, but we even got quite a bit of press off the back of it, where they were like, Abel is admitting where they're wrong and being honest about it. To me, I was like, of course we'd be honest about that, but apparently that's not a given.
And I love that, because it is so hard to try things that people wouldn't even know were a basic. So, if you have a perfume, no department stores will accept it unless it's perfectly wrapped in cellophane. And that cellophane is a bunch of plastic that you don't want, and then it costs heaps to put it on, especially, if you're making small volumes. And that cellophane, when we tried to wrap it, that process added about $20 to the RRP, which is wild. And so you're putting all of this different
imagine telling that to your customer, hey, $20 of your purchase price is cellophane.
Yeah, that
you don't want.
That you immediately throw out.
Yeah.
And it's never recycled. It's an absolute disaster. But there was no way out of that kind of thing. So
and
so
look,
great
even to
and,
the point where stores would cellophane it for you if you were going to refuse, which then you've got no control over the process.
Yeah, but by telling that story and starting to educate people, then maybe people will be, okay to get a box that might have a slight smudge on it.
Yeah, no,
because that's what sustainability means, you know?
And I think we are hitting that, to the earlier point, I think we're hitting that tipping point now where actually people go, okay, cool, maybe it's not quite as luxury, but maybe it shouldn't be quite as luxury. Maybe I don't want 3 pieces of wrapping. And so we will redesign the packaging. It's currently kind of in the R&D innovation stage for us. But I really want to do it in a meaningful way. And for example, our little perfume extrait line, they are refillable. So they're refillable in Wellington, but 85% of our market is international. So then you go, how meaningful is it to offer refills if it's in Wellington? So when we redesign it, it has to be in a way that it makes sense to the consumer. And I think, without offending anyone, consumers are kind of inherently lazy. If it's not something I can just deal with it in my normal recycling kind of environment, I'm probably not going to do anything.
Yeah, hassle and inertia are really big forces to get around, eh?
And I'm the same, really, by the way. I'm not pointing finger.
We all are. With my pet food, all of my principles in life go out the window because we use the foil things. And I was just thinking about it the other day, and they're completely unrecyclable. And we only use those because, it's a little bit nicer of an experience.
Yeah.
And then you realise, well, you're just making this enormous waste pile behind you, So even when you think you're kind of on the right track with a lot of stuff and you're thinking about stuff, and then you go, oh, that's right, I'm just ignoring
all
totally. Shit, which is just because of hassle. And then in terms of the capital raise you've just done, that's so exciting, and a huge raise for, a brand-led business out of New Zealand selling to the world with something cool in this emerging natural perfume space. Tell me about that raise and what that allows you to do and how you can grow the mission.
Yeah, I agree. I'm really excited about it. So back in January, I had the conversation with my management team, who are kind of based, one's in Boston, one's in Amsterdam, and then in New Zealand. Do we want to raise funds? Do we want to continue to grow in this kind of organic trajectory, kind of bootstrapping, self-funding? Or do we want to be ambitious, basically? And the overarching response from them and me, I kind of put it to them knowing where my mind was at, was that we owe it to ourselves to be ambitious. We've got such a cool product. We know the market's there. The wave's just coming. And that was kind of, our sales manager up in Boston was like, I don't want some other brand to lead this category. Screw it. We've been here from the start, we want to lead this category, and it's just really starting to emerge. So that was kind of the decision to go for the funding. We, at the same time, made the decision to take our US market, which is our biggest market, wholesale. So we were working with a distributor up there. But by taking it wholesale, we can really control more of that journey to the customer, also more D2C potential. So really cool opportunity up there. And the funding will allow us to add boots on the ground, start investing in brand building. I was up there 6 weeks ago. You realize when you're in America how big America is. It sounds silly or obvious, but from here you can kind of forget, and then you get up there and you're like, fuck, LA's huge. And when we talk about the US, we've kind of identified, New York, California are our two biggest opportunities, and a couple more cities, but even, just focusing on that's more than we can kind of handle. So we've got really, really cool plans. Maker Capital, who we're partnering with, are awesome. I'm just super thrilled to have such a cool strategic partner. They're a bunch of Kiwis, but they're based across New Zealand, Melbourne, and the US. And so to have that kind of in-market strategic support as well is incredible. And they share our values. So they're very much like an impact product-led fund. And so already, we've had our first kind of board meetings and things like that already. The strategic value of having these incredible brains in the business, I'm really excited by.
Yeah, they're great. They are in a couple of great companies that do kind of accessible, approachable, sustainable, better choices, like No Issue and Compostic.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
Great bunch of people.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. And what would your advice be for someone who maybe does see an industry and go, why isn't there a better choice? And then runs into kind of these kind of headwinds. What would your advice be to them?
I think just start and look, someone else will give you the advice, make sure you've got your 5-year business plan. My advice would be just to get started, but to make sure you have a really clear North Star. Why are you doing this? If you are going to be, it's been kind of 10 years of Abel for me, you're going to be telling the story over and over again. You're going to be, the biggest advocate for your brand. You've got to really believe in what you're doing. So to me, that would be get super clear on what you want to do and why, and then just start. Yeah. Start and sorry, I'm listening to, there'll be other people listening to this, you're terrible advice.
No, it's great advice. Yeah, start and keep going.
Totally, start and keep going. Yeah. I often get asked, what's the biggest challenge? I'm like, just that the challenges are relentless, and they just morph all the time, and you get bigger and you solve one problem and you're like, oh shit, I didn't even see this whole thing developing over there, so I think you just, and embrace problem solving. Maybe that's a good tip, if you find the joy in solving the problems, then the problems become kind of fun. If you let each problem arise kind of bowl you over, then you're not going to get very far.
And as a final thought, what will success be for you and for the business?
Yeah, for the business, we're setting these kind of cool, lofty goals of being the leaders in natural perfume globally. So that's really our remit as a business, our North Star. For me personally, I think it will be doing that in a way that my marriage and family flourishes. So I think that's always, as like a businesswoman who cares about my life as well, that's kind of, those two things need to happen kind of symbiotically. And that I can do it in a way where I can encourage some people to come up underneath me as well. I think that's really, especially as a woman in business, I think things are changing, but it's still harder and it's still, there's just a few more hurdles to overcome. Perhaps the biggest hurdle being our own fears and, not feeling like we can think big. So, yeah, personally, I'd really love to start nurturing that next generation of women in business.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, I can't wait to see where you take it next. And thank you so much for sharing your story today. That's Frances Shoemack, founder of Abel.
Thanks.
So thank you to Frances, to you for listening, and for everyone who helps make this happen, like our producer, Te Aihe Butler. Do follow Business is Boring wherever you get your podcasts, and be sure to rate and leave a review if you like what we do. E nohora.
From the Spin-Off Podcast Network, that was Business is Boring, brought to you by SparkLab. Make sure you're following Business is Boring wherever you get your podcasts. And for more information on SparkLab, visit sparklab.co.nz. Kia ora e te iwi, Te Aihe Butler here, podcast manager at The Spin-Off. If you enjoy listening to our podcasts, consider supporting our mahi by signing up to become a Spin-Off member at thespinoff.co.nz/donate. The Spin-Off Podcast Network.